Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Around the Table Sports. So as many of you probably already heard, Michigan has just signed Jim Harbaugh to a contract extension and we have to get into it. But before we do, as always, if you're here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I do constant college football content and I'd love to have you along for the journey. If you enjoyed the video, drop a thumbs up and let me know in the comments whether or not you think Michigan made the right decision in extending Jim Harbaugh's comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say, so drop a comment down below letting me know. Y'all, likes and comments do a ton for smaller channels like mine in getting picked up by the YouTube algorithm, and we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers, so I'd love to have you along for the journey. But with all that being said, let's get straight into it. So for those of you that may have seen, and many of you may not have, I made a video before this college football season started talking about Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. The premise of the video, and I'm going to go over it just in case you haven't seen it, was I didn't know where they were going to go after the past season they had where they lost the bowl game in the fashion they did. And let me explain. So Michigan has perennially had the problem with Harbaugh that they beat teams they should beat. It's when they're playing more upper echelon talent, upper ranked teams, that they just don't win big games. Now, you know, they lost to Ohio State last year and I don't think anyone was surprised. And then when they got to play Alabama in the bowl game, I think that it was probably Michigan's best opportunity to beat a perennial blue blood program. Alabama, if y'all remember going into that bowl game, was literally hobbling into that game. You know, the injury to Tua Tagovailoa was horrible in the Mississippi State game, and that left that team in shambles, no doubt, because he was the heart and soul of that team. It was still plenty talented with Najee, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. You name it, they had it. But that wasn't the only injury they had. And in fact, on the defensive side of the football, they had both middle linebackers go down before the season even started, defensive linemen go down. That team was in absolute shambles really from the get-go. And so when they lined up with Michigan, and Michigan already thought that they had a season where they feel like they're on the verge of going to the college football playoffs, they just need to get over that hump of beating an Ohio State, of beating an Alabama. When they get Alabama and Alabama's hurt, if I was a Michigan fan, I'd have been very excited because I would have been thinking to myself, this is the game where we can get over that hump. It doesn't matter if Alabama's walking into this game with one leg hobbling around because they're so injured. We will beat a perennial powerhouse with a powerhouse coach who's the greatest college football coach right now and probably of all time. But when the game happened, Michigan got slapped around. And when I was sitting there watching it, I wasn't super surprised Michigan was getting slapped around. But it was very telling to me because it made me realize just how far behind they are from an Ohio State and Alabama. And I would even argue a team like Oklahoma. Oklahoma perennially made the playoffs and would get smacked, sure, but this year, Oklahoma's defense looks to have taken legitimate strides as the year has gone on. And look, guys, I understand that we give each other a hard time in the comments because, you know, maybe Oklahoma got beat in the playoffs. But the goal of a college football season is to get better. And at the point where Oklahoma wasn't going to get in the playoffs very early in this season, the only thing you can ask for is improvement from week whatever to the end of the season, and that's exactly what they did, specifically on defense. So I have a lot of respect for the way Oklahoma finished this season, and I think they're going to be a very good team moving into next year. The same cannot be said for like a Michigan. Michigan had an Alabama on the ropes and didn't finish the job. They got smacked around by Alabama. And then when they go into this year, they have a horrible year this year. And look, I'm not going to say Harbaugh is having a ton of trouble on the recruiting trail because he's perennially finishing in that 8 to 13 range. But there was much more hype a few years ago with Jim Harbaugh. For those of you that remember when Najee Harris was deciding which institution he was going to go to, there was a lot of debate whether it was going to be Michigan or Alabama. Now, ultimately, he chose Alabama, and a big part of that was he felt like Nick Saban was much more business than Jim Harbaugh was, which is absolutely true. You know, I think there's a story that I've told before, but I'm going to tell it again, that really encapsulates my biggest issue with Jim Harbaugh. Because I think Jim Harbaugh is a good football coach. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think his personality probably hinders him in how he's approaching these college kids and how he's viewed. And let me break this down. So there was a recruit a while ago, Isaiah Wilson, 5-star tackle, who was between Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan. At the point where he wanted to commit to Alabama, he went to give Nick Saban a hug, and Saban didn't hug him. That was a big deal to him. And look, As petty as that might sound, that's real, right? I have nothing but respect for that young man because he knew that was something that was important to him. Whether that seems small to you or not, you have to think of it from the position of this is an 18-year-old individual who is going to spend the next 4 years of their life in a completely different environment with completely different individuals and away from their family. And if that type of interaction with his coach was going to make him feel better and that's important to him, then I absolutely respect that decision of him not going to Alabama because that wasn't Saban's deal. There was no love lost, but I have nothing but respect for an individual that knows what they want and is willing to go after it without putting other people down. Now, the story gets much more muddied when it comes to how his recruitment was lost by Michigan. Now, he went to have Jim Harbaugh in for an in-home visit. Harbaugh comes, and what seems like it's going to be a great evening quickly becomes very apparent that it's not your typical evening and that Harbaugh is not your typical individual. You see, Jim Harbaugh went into that house to have dinner with this family with cleats on and refused to take them off. So I want you to imagine that you're sitting across from a coach who is walking around your house in football cleats and he's some 50-year-old man, right? Some 40, 50-year-old man. At that point, it becomes almost a meme, right? Like, Harbaugh, in my opinion, tries way too hard to be relatable, and it's like that picture of Steve Buscemi where he has the skateboard and he's like, "What's up, fellow kids?" That's Jim Harbaugh to me. It is painstakingly obviously that he wants to be liked so bad that he's willing to go to lengths to embarrass himself, like wearing cleats inside of some recruit's house. So what do I think about this Michigan contract extension? I think Michigan wants Harbaugh to be the guy. In a perfect world, they would love for Harbaugh to be the guy, but I think Michigan also realizes that they're in a bad position because I don't think anybody else wants to come into that job realizing how far they are behind Ryan Day and Ohio State, specifically in a year where Ryan Day and Ohio State are about to sign the second best recruiting class in the nation, that any other year would be the number one recruiting class in the nation. I'm talking 5 stars in this class, an absolutely game-changing class. Michigan is sitting on the back end of the 10 to 15 range, right? I think they're just about 14 in the nation right now, which is a great recruiting class, all things considered. But when you're competing with an Alabama or Ohio State, that's not going to get the job done if you're not already on their level, and you're not. So not only does Michigan have Harbaugh, who kind of, in my opinion, tries too hard, they're stuck in a position where they don't think they can hire anybody else because the gap is that wide between they and Ohio State. That, and why would somebody come take that job knowing the expectations Michigan has, the history of the program? It's an amazing job, but you're going up against Ohio State and there's no end in sight to this Ryan Day Ohio State reign. So look, it's a position where I think Michigan made the right decision ultimately because they want Harbaugh to be their guy. If in a perfect world, Harbaugh would be the guy. I also just don't think that they had a lot of faith in anybody else, right? I think it's very hard to convince a guy like Pat Fitzgerald for a lateral move in the same conference. I don't think that there was anybody that they just looked at with a ton of faith. A guy like PJ Fleck, once again, that's a very lateral move, and it's an absolute upgrade in institution, but both of them right now aren't having to compete with the guys of it's Ohio State or bust. They're not having that demon on their shoulder. That means something, right? It means they get to build a program the way they want to, in the manner they want to, in the time frame they want to, whereas Michigan is on the time frame of Ohio State and beat them quickly. So with all that being said, I'm super interested to know what y'all think about this contract extension. Look, as much as I think that Harbaugh and Harbaugh's not the answer because he's a raw guy, I do think he's a good coach, and I just don't think Michigan knew where else to go, and they want more than anything to be for Harbaugh to be the guy. So with all that being said, y'all drop a comment down below to let me know what you think, and thank you so much for checking out the video. That's it. See ya.